everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and for today's video I'm going to be trying a popular author for the very first time. So you're probably well aware that E Schwab is one of BookTube's darlings. Everybody seems to love at least one thing written by E Schwab. Whether it's her middle grade stuff, her young adult stuff, or her adult stuff, people seem to just really like her, and I've not yet read anything from her. I really just haven't, and I'm not sure how. She has had so many books that have just blown up on BookTube, and for some reason I haven't read them. So I figured it would be a fun idea to make a video reading E Schwab for the first time. I figured it was only right if I give her a fair shot, so I will be reading 3 books by her in this video, and I have them right here. I actually only had to purchase one of these for the sake of this video, and it was a book I wanted to read anyway, because the other thing is that I've wanted to read E Schwab for a very long time and just haven't. I don't know why, but I have 3 books here. This was back when she wrote under Victoria Schwab, which I believe she still does. Sometimes it's the same person. So the first book I will be reading for this video is The Archived. This is the first book in a duology. It's young adult and it's fantasy, and it's set in this world where there is, well, I mean, it's the archive, and it says, imagine a place where the dead rest on shelves like books. Our main character Mackenzie, or Mac, works at the archive. The dead are called histories, and the vast realm in which they rest is the archive. So Mac works in the archive. Her dad died, her little brother has also died recently, and so she's dealing with a lot of grief, and she's kind of struggling with what is the real line between dead and alive, because she's surrounded by these souls, kind of, in a way. It says, in the archive the dead must never be disturbed, and yet someone is deliberately altering histories, erasing essential chapters. Victoria Schwab reveals the thin lines between past and present, love and pain, trust and deceit, unbearable loss, and hard-won redemption. I've wanted to read this book since it came out in 2013. And everybody read it then, and everybody loved it, and I just never picked it up. So I'm glad to finally have an excuse to read it. It's not terribly long, so I should be able to get through this pretty fast. It's also got pretty big writing and like spaced out lines. But yeah, this is the first book I plan on reading for this video. I don't know if I will read these in any particular order, but this was the first one that came out. The next book I have for this is Vicious, which is by E Schwab. Same person, different pseudonym. God, what is this about? This is the one where we follow 2 people who used to be college roommates. They're experimenting through college to do with the supernatural. Something happens, and I believe they end up with supernatural abilities. Flash forward 10 years, Victor breaks out of prison, and he wants to catch his old friend, now foe, Eli, and he's aided by a young girl with a stunning ability. Meanwhile, Eli is trying to kill everybody else with supernatural powers, because, you know, why not? Aside from his sidekick, an enigmatic, is that how you say it? Woman with an unbreakable will. So they're arch nemesis, and they are after revenge on each other. When it first came out, I had no interest in it whatsoever, but I have heard person upon person raving about this book that I'm like, kind of want to read it now. I do think I will enjoy this. As I've gotten older, it sounds more like something I'll enjoy. This book also came out a while ago, 2014, but I'm intrigued to read this. It sounds like it's going to have a lot to do with betrayal and potentially rebuilding a friendship, although I don't know where this series goes, because I know there's a sequel, so maybe not rebuilding the friendship. And then the last book I have for this video, and ironically the first book by E Schwab that I ever gained into my life, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This one intrigued me right from the get-go. I have always thought that I would enjoy this one. It's just so long, and people have hyped it up so much that I'm scared I won't like it as much as everybody else, so I keep not picking it up. It's one of those things where the hype kind of makes you afraid of it. But this is about a girl named Addie LaRue who makes a deal with the devil, which enables her to live forever. However, no one can remember her. So, like, I think it's after a 24-hour span, people no idea who she is. She can spend an entire day with someone and the next day they won't know who she is. They'll feel like they've never seen her before. That's kind of a very, very lonely existence because you can't make any relationships with anybody and you're just stuck alive. So she's, you know, struggling through that, and then she comes across this man, I think his name is Henry. He remembers her, and that sparks off this whole thing because obviously the devil's like, excuse me, you're breaking the rules. I'm just really excited to read this one. I really love romance. romance, and this one sounds the most romantic of all three of these. I love this cover. I think it's beautiful. Everybody loves this book, even people who typically don't love books like this. I don't know, I really want to love it, but I'm also really scared I won't. My nails match this book a lot more than I thought they would. My nails won't stay like this. So these are the books I plan on reading for this video. I'll be updating you with my overall thoughts and opinions of each book as I go, and I will also do like a final thoughts and opinions thing at the end of this, talking about my experiences reading E Schwab for the first time and how I feel about her as an author, and if I'll be reading more from her going forward. I think 3 books is a good starting point to give someone a real chance to see if there's someone whose writing I will enjoy, and if there's someone whose characters and plot styles I will enjoy. I don't typically do this. It's not very often in my reading life that I will purchase multiple books by an author not having read anything from them in the past. I will typically read at least 1 book by an author before I buy more, but I'm very excited to read these. But yes, you will see me next when I have something to say about one of these books. I'm excited to do this. I hope I enjoy them all, and I hope this isn't a big flop. I will see you when I have an update for a book. Alright, so it's been a minute. I actually finished this book like a week ago. I'm currently in the process of leaving my current job and getting a new job, so I've been very busy. There were some unanticipated, unexpected, big life changes, but I'm here. So I have finished The Archived, the first book I was planning on reading for this video, and I really liked it. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I really liked the characters. I thought they were quite interesting. There was a lot of exploration of grief. I was incorrect. I thought that Da was her father. No, he's her grandfather. Not a term we ever come across here in New Zealand, so I'm not gonna feel bad that I didn't know that. But I did find the kind of fantasy elements of this quite interesting. Victoria Schwab definitely knows how to craft a very vivid world. The Archive and like the Narrows were a very odd place to read about. Kind of creepy, kind of eerie, but also I wasn't scared while reading this book. I feel like if she'd have wanted to, the author could have definitely made this book more spooky, but it doesn't read that way. I don't know how to review books. I really liked the relationship that was developing between Mac and Wesley. It was a very interesting dynamic that for the most part they were the only people that they knew that they could actually be completely honest to, because this whole thing with the Narrows and the Archive and histories and all that is secret. People aren't allowed to know about it, so the fact that they both knew about it kind of opened up this door, no pun intended, for each of them to have someone to confide in and who would actually know the real them. And I thought that was interesting, the way they could so quickly rely on each other even though they're not really used to trusting people. Particularly with Mac, she's very reserved and hesitant and very detached from the life that she lives outside of the world of the Archived. She considers it like an alternate persona that she calls M. She puts on an act, and she's never her true self around her family, and you can see that really starting to weigh on her. I wanted to see more from the parents. Mac lives with her mum and her dad. Her brother has just died, so there's a lot of grief going on in that family. They've moved to this hotel in an attempt to try and move forward, move on, do something else to take them away from that grief. It's not really working. You can really see this very strong divide between Mac and her parents, both because she has this entire secret life going on with the Archived and all that, but also because of this grief. Her father has kind of disappeared into himself. He doesn't engage with pretty much anything. Her mother, she goes from project to project pretending that she's okay and that everything's okay, and just throwing everything she has into these projects. And on the one hand, I found it very interesting that we got to see these different ways that people experience grief, because we do also have Mac's own grief about the whole situation. She's kind of holding on to every piece of her brother that she can. She doesn't want to let him go. So we had 3 distinct versions versions of grief that this novel kind of explored. And because of the ways that her parents were grieving, we didn't really see much interaction between them and Mac that really meant anything. She lives with her parents still, you know, she's still their kid, and she disappears for hours at a time, at any time of the day or night, and they don't even really notice. You know, she's covered in scars from battles and injuries, and they don't notice, okay? Especially when you consider that a lot of these injuries happened before her brother died. So the grief wouldn't have been something that was blinding them then. So what? It's that typical YA thing where the adults in the story are naive to the entire situation. I understand why that needs to happen in most YA books, because you need the teenagers to be the ones who are responsible for everything and the ones who have to save everyone. It just doesn't always make sense, and it doesn't always feel believable. I feel like there were too many times when Mac at the very least should have gotten in trouble. Even if they didn't notice what was going on, she should have gotten in trouble for things. I did like this book. I feel like I'm ragging on it now, but no, I did really enjoy this. It's a kind of book where you finish it and then it's in the next few days, as you think about it, you like it more. You like increase your opinion of it. This is an older YA book now. This came out in 2013, so it is a little older. It's 2022 now. It's almost 10 years old. And in some ways, I could really feel that, but in a lot of ways, I couldn't. There is a sequel to this, and like, I kind of want to read it. The romance subplot in this book was not what I was anticipating. It definitely did a 180. It's not what you think it's gonna be, and it's a bit weird. But yeah, so I read this and I enjoyed it. That's kind of really all I have to say on the matter. So 4 out of 5 stars. We're off to a good start with the E Schwab experience. The next book I'm going to be reading is Vicious. I am looking forward to reading that. I have faith that E Schwab can write things I enjoy, but of course the next 2 are both adult novels, so I guess we'll see how that goes. And I'll tell you how it goes once I've read them. This is some 2003 looking hair going on. Wow, okay. So I finished Vicious by E Schwab, and I really liked this. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, but it's more like a 4.5 rounded up to a 5. This was surprisingly enjoyable. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this as much as I did. I thought of all the books I was reading for this video, this would be the one I liked the least. I was incorrect. I definitely saw growth in her writing style and her plot development and characters, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like I need to give you a refresher on what this is about. This book is about these 2 guys, Victor and Eli, who were friends in college, and they started experimenting around EOs, or extraordinaries, superpowers basically, and they ended up both having superpowers, and something goes very, very, very wrong, and then we flash forward 10 years. Victor's broken out of prison, and he's trying to hunt down Eli. Eli is trying to eradicate all of the superpowered people. This book has such an interesting narrative perspective. We jump around a handful of perspectives, but also we are flying all over the place in terms of the timeline. We are following them 10 years ago when they were in college. We are following them now. We are following them 2 weeks ago. We're following them a couple months ago. It's so interestingly told. This cover makes a lot more sense now with the blocked out words. I didn't understand it before. It makes sense now. And I do think I want to read the sequel to this, because what an ending! I really, really enjoyed this. I found the dynamics of the characters quite interesting to read. It's not the kind of thing I typically engage in. Eli is such an interesting examination of the human capacity to excuse oneself from the rule. To come up with some concept and then say, accept me. And Victor, he's just an amalgamation of issues. This man needs therapy. I found them very fascinating characters to read about, especially reading their perspectives on each other. I loved Sydney. Sydney was so sweet. And Mitch. Anyone who loves chocolate milk as much as I do is valid. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this and I had such a good time reading it. I would recommend it. I can understand why everyone else loves it so much now. It was a good time. It was very well crafted. It was thought out very well, and I've started to notice a trend in E Schwab's books. Because I'm reading these so close together, it really sticks out to me that there is an underlying thread of death. And I don't just mean people are dying like that. No, that happens in all books pretty much. What I mean is death is used as an important part of something. It was important in the archive as well, in regards to, you know, the archive being a place where essentially like souls of the dead are stored. Death plays a huge role in this book as well, and in the events that are happening. Surely this isn't a coincidence, right? I know E Schwab has other books out there that I feel like probably have nothing to do with death, and maybe this is just a huge coincidence, but I can't help but notice. I also think I can understand why this book got so popular on BookTube, in the space where so many people typically read young adult books, because this book was so easy to read. It wasn't hard, it wasn't too dense or too slow or anything like that. It very much read similarly to YA books, except it was an adult book. You know, it had higher vocabulary, it had more serious subject matter, it had older characters with different experiences, but it had a very easy to read quality to it that I think was probably very appreciated in the booktube community at the time that it came out, when a lot of booktubers were reaching an age where they felt like they probably should be reading more adult literature. I clearly read majority young adult, except for the odd romance book. So this is very outside of the norm of what I would read as well, and I found it very easy to read and very enjoyable. And I don't know, there's like, I almost want to say the book is charismatic, but that doesn't make sense. I flew through this. I read it in like 2 days. I pretty much read the whole thing, probably about this much of it, in one day, in a couple of sittings. It was so easy to read and so quick to fly through, and honestly I think it was a very solid sci-fi thing. It's this more intimate story of these two guys and this beef that they have with each other, and the way powers can affect a person, and the way having abilities can change how you view your status in comparison to other people, and can change the way you think of other people with similar abilities. I'm glad I finally read it. It's been many years since it came out and I first heard about it. I'm glad I'm making this video and that it pushed me to finally read this book. So I had a very positive experience reading this, and so I'm even more excited to finally get into The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which was the next book I'm planning on reading for this video. It's been a long time coming to finally read that book, and I'm excited to have read some of the staple E Schwab books that everybody loves, and to know what people are talking about. I will come back once I've read that third and final book for this video, and then we can wrap up this video and I can put it out. But I'll be back once I've read that book and can tell you what I thought. Okay, so I'm back and I finished this, but before I get into that, my goodness, this video is going to be so late. I should have uploaded this last week. I was so busy getting ready for my new job and then starting my new job, and I just didn't have time to read and or film. This month has been absolutely insane. But I finished The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and oh my god, 5 stars. The highest of 5 stars. This book made me ugly cry. I was sobbing. I used like 7-8 tissues, snot everywhere. It was disgusting. I almost filmed it because I was like, this could be good content, but then I was like, no, that's embarrassing. Wow. I'll admit, while I was reading this, I didn't understand why everybody was so obsessed with it, and then by the time I finished it, I understand. It's the journey. So this book follows a young woman named Addie LaRue who made a deal with the darkness, or the devil, or the gods who answer after dark, which resulted in her having essentially immortality. She can't die, and she's frozen forever at 23, but no one can remember who she is. The second that she's out of sight, she's literally out of mind. If they walk out of the room, they forget who she is, and she can't say her name. So this deal, while she's alive forever, she's also erased from the world immediately. Like, she can make no lasting impression, and it honestly sounds traumatizing. And then she meets this guy named Henry who, for whatever reason, can remember her, and it's This book is a roller coaster of emotions. First of all, V.E. Schwab has once again made such a vivid world. It's so well described. There are so many locations in this book and so many different time eras in this book, and they all felt very real and very believable. I loved all of the characters. I loved the depth to them. They all had a lot going on. V.E. Schwab writes such emotionally connective characters, I guess, where even if you don't necessarily agree with the things that they're doing, you feel for them and you can relate to them even when it's situations you would never find yourself in and decisions you would never make. This book is heartbreaking, and it's just a very good, solid kind of fantasy situation for the first chunk of it, and then it becomes this really intense story of love and two people coming together and actually being what the other person needs, and then it just decides that actually we're gonna ruin your life now. This book was so I feel like I have the least to say about this one because I loved it so much, but I don't really want to say anything about it because I don't want to spoil anything for you. I loved Addie as a character. I found her so powerful and strong. She goes through just so much in this book, and she just keeps on coming out the other end of it, and honestly, it's admirable. The relationship between her and the darkness is so interesting to see because it takes on many different forms. There are many different ways in which they interact with each other and ways in which they view each other, and it really threw me through a loop at one point, but at the same time, I can see how that would happen, and I can see how that would feel like the only option. It was also very interesting to see and learn more about Henry and why he could actually remember her and what his story was, and seeing the way their two stories intertwined and were kind of always had to, it really just brought it all full circle even more. I can't talk about this book too much because so much of the experience of reading this book is not really knowing where it's going to take you. I did find it fascinating seeing the ways that Addie had to make her way through the world because, you know, everywhere she went, anywhere she was, whoever was around her, it was always the first time they saw her in their eyes. So she had to make her way through life starting from like the 1700s as a young woman alone, no money, no nothing to her name, and make her way through the world. Absolutely tragic, some of the things that she had to do and some of the sacrifices that she had to make and the lengths that she had to go to get through. This book has a lot to say about humanity and the social ability of humans, the things that people will do out of desperation, but also the way that humans have a capacity to hold on to hope. I would highly recommend this book. I think most people would enjoy it. It's the kind of book that it does a lot in a lot of small things that add up. When I finished this book, I looked back and I thought that was a long book, like it's over 500 pages, but there is not a single thing that I think you could take out of it. I think every single scene is integral to the overall impact and effect of the novel as a whole. And I think if any one thing was missing, it wouldn't be as good. I'm so glad that I finally read this book. I have had this book on my TBR for like 2 years, and I finally picked it up and read it, and I could not be happier. This was outstanding. Now, with all that said and done, it is time to reflect on this adventure and discuss with you my final thoughts and opinions. So, over the last, well, let's face it, almost a month, I read 3 books written by author V.E. Schwab, and it was my first experience reading from this author. I read The Archived, which she wrote under the name Victoria Schwab, and I gave this a 4 stars. I read Vicious, which was written under the name V.E. Schwab, and I gave it 5 stars. And I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which was also written under V.E. Schwab, and I also gave this 5 stars. What did I learn? 1, I definitely want to read from this author again in the future. I had such a good time reading these books that I have such high faith in her capability as an author that I will definitely check out more of her stuff in the future. I think I saw improvements in her writing throughout these. I actually read them in the order that they were released, and I would say with each book it just got better and better. Her characters became more in-depth and more developed and more nuanced, and she's always had a talent for writing vivid and descriptive worlds, but they just became even more. There's such a clear difference between The Archive and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue in terms of quality and the intensity of how enjoyable each element was, and Vicious felt like a pretty good stepping stone in the middle of those. You could see some of her honed skills shining through here, but it was still earlier in her career, and so it still had some of the I don't want to say shortcomings because I still really liked this, but it had some of the room to grow that was in here. But obviously I gave this a 5 stars as well, so not a lot of room to grow. I think she has a knack for writing very unique stories and bringing characters to the forefront who make questionable choices but are, you know, believable and people that you connect to and want to succeed. I still think that there was a weird focus on death in these books, so that's a theme that I see underlining at least these 3 books. But yeah, I had an amazing experience reading the Schwab books this month, and I'm so glad that I gave this author a try, and reading these books consecutively I think gave me a little bit more of an insight into the ways her writing and her narratives and her characters have developed and grown throughout the years, and I can't wait to read more from her in the future. So if you have any recommendations of the E Schwab books that I haven't read that you think I would love, do let me know, because this was honestly a very successful concept for me. You know, every single one of these books got a high rating. I'm just very happy. I guess that's kind of all I have to say. I don't know what else I could say. I obviously enjoyed this experience. I can safely add V.E. Schwab into the ranks of authors I love. If you've read any of these books or you've read anything else by V.E. Schwab, please let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If there are any other authors you think I should do a video like this on, where I try an author for the first time and read 3 books that they've written, do let me know, because I think this was fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I do post every single week except last week, but we're not talking about that. And yeah, I hope to see you next time in a new video. Bye!